Hello, welcome to the Social Capital Guy podcast. My name is Bevon Joseph, aka the Social Capital Guy, and I will be your host. After working on Wall Street for 15 plus years and running a successful nonprofit for the last 7, I decided to pivot to share my knowledge and network to help others find ways to increase their social capital. I believe that relationships are at the core of life, especially in business, and your network is your net worth. This podcast focuses on what I call the 3 C's: careers, community, and capital. And when I talk about capital, I mean both social and financial capital. So let's get into it. TikTok. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Social Capital Guy podcast. I'm your host, Bevon Joseph. With every episode, I aim to provide my listeners with a few call to action questions like, what are you going to do now with this information? Can you connect with our guests and myself as well? And just useful, motivational, inspiring content you could use in your everyday life. So this podcast is centered around what I call the 3 C's: community, careers, and capital. And in this episode, because I'll be my special guest, we could touch actually on all 3 C's. My guest today is someone that I connected with a couple years ago. And on the theme of social capital, I met him through another friend, a mutual friend. His name is Matt Stephenson. And originally, we have some connections on the islands, myself being from Trinidad, and he has like a Jamaican age as well too. But again, social capital for me is super important, has played a big role in my life, professionally and personally. So Matt is a co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Code to College. And I'll have him kind of jump into what it is and the mission. This podcast is all about talking to my friends and talking to people who are in the trenches, on the front lines, doing the work. And so without further ado, I'll introduce Matt to have him kind of list his little pitch, his story. So Matt, thanks again, man. I really, really appreciate you joining me in conversation today, and I'll hand it off to you to do your intro.
Bevon, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to connect and reconnect, and I appreciate being one of your early guests on the podcast. My name is Matt Stephenson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Code to College. We are an Austin-based workforce development and STEM education nonprofit that has a particular differentiator in that we place high school students who are mostly Black, brown, and girls into paid technical internships during the summer.
When I met through our mutual work with young people and helping them figure out their career trajectory, or primarily in the tech space, I was in the financial services space, but also I think the theme throughout all our programming was tech. The fact that the world is going to be heavy tech in the future, these young people we're working with in high school now, literally the jobs that they'll be doing, some of them don't even exist yet. So I think the fact that you're preparing them at such an early age, these skill sets are like super, super important. So we'll jump right in. So I think as we think about community, again, we're working with a population that, in my opinion, has been it's been hard for them to access opportunity. And I think opportunity really opens up a lot of doors for young people in particular. So if you could talk a little bit about why did you start Code to College? Or what was the need that you saw and some of the results over the last 6 years or so?
So I actually started out in financial services as well and loved my time in financial services, but I actually double majored in both finance and information systems. I was told by an elder in my church right as I was about to graduate from high school that I should do computers when I go off to college. I didn't know what she meant, and I don't think she knew what she meant, but it was a life-changing decision learning how to code my freshman year of college. I was able to pick up several internships and side projects along the way, and I was able to defray probably about half of my college expenses. And if you're familiar with NYU, it is outrageously expensive. And so that was a big deal for me. But even beyond that, I was able to leverage my background with coding when I was working at the bank, because we were using VBA, or if you want to go real old school, Visual Basic. And I was able to build macros that made everyone's life a lot easier. And I just realized early on that there was this incredible opportunity when you learn how to code, because the barriers to entry are so low. Back then, 20 plus years ago, you pick up a book, find a computer with, medium speed internet and a compiler, and you were good to go. These days, you don't even need the books. You can just log on at your local library and you can start coding pretty easily without any cost. And so I wanted to provide this type of skill set and the opportunities that would be afforded economically, professionally, personally to students who look like me, because I know so often that access was not afforded to them. And so for a number of years, I was, from working in the private sector at the bank to working for another nonprofit that did work similar to what we do now at Code to College, placing undergraduate students of color into front office roles. I was just inspired, and I wanted to figure out, how do we scale this? How do we bring this concept of a little bit of opportunity and access goes a long way with coding? And so went to business school and had a great experience there in learning how to launch, operate, and scale an organization. Took the regular route and taught high school math right after business school, and then had a number of roles in the social impact space, from working as a venture philanthropy investor to working for a charter school network as director of finance. And then ultimately, when we moved here to Austin, looked around and said, this is it. You've got this thriving tech hub. All of the usual suspects have either headquarters here or a satellite office here, but you're a stone's throw away from low income and communities of color who would probably never think that they could work at, any of these tech giants, let alone as an engineer. And so Code to College was born soon after that. It started to make the rounds to different tech meetups, asked engineers and developers if they were interested in teaching kids of color how to code. And, that first year, we placed 2 students into paid technical internships, and they got return offers. So we've grown pretty significantly since then, have served just over 3,000 high school students nationally, placed about 300 of them into these paid summer internships as high school students. And I would say one of my proudest data points is the fact that 83% of hiring managers from this past summer rated our high school students as performing at or above the level of undergraduate interns.
Wow, that's amazing. Again, speaks a lot to the work you guys are doing. And I think, to your point, right, and I've seen it with what I've been doing for the last 7 years as well. These young people are smart, talented, eager, ready to learn. The only thing they're lacking is that network. They don't know anybody who's doing this stuff for a living. They're usually the first generation college as well, on their way to college, first in their family. And what I see is when they get exposure to opportunity, like, they latch onto it, man, and they go all in. And that shows up, at work, and we get the same feedback from employers. Our interns outperform, but that's because when they get access to that opportunity and that exposure, and you know how it is, they might need some initial hand holding, but they get up to speed really quickly. And the fact that you guys have that high percentage of employee satisfaction and return offers, and I'm sure full-time jobs down the road, that's just a testament to the work you guys are doing. So, question for you, as you talked about scaling up really quickly, business school, moving to Austin, starting Code to College, 2 students initially. So how was networking or social capital, like, what part did that play in your journey as far as getting Code to College up and running? I tell people that the organization I built was an overnight success, 20 years in the making, because everything I did in my entire career played a part in what transpired later on. So what was that like for you?
Absolutely, 100%. Everything that I've achieved has come through hard work and my network. Neither will result in true success. Neither alone will help you result in true success. And everything from the opportunities that I learned about when I was in high school, from helping me develop my public speaking skills and any fears that I had of public speaking. I remember my best friend in high school brought me into the AXO competition from the NAACP, and did my spoken word in front of a crowd of hundreds of students, and imagine being back in high school. There's all these pretty girls, and it's like, whoa, I'm really putting myself out there like that. But from that to I had friends. Even I remember in undergrad, my college girlfriend's sister got me my first financial services internship at the bank, and that was huge. I remember the full-time role that I got. The best man at my wedding, who at that point had been my college roommate, he introduced me or submitted my resume as an internal referral for that role that I got, and was at for 2 years. Even now, when I look at the growth of Code to College here in Austin, there was just an incredible network that I plugged into from my Wharton network. Is just the entrepreneurs that I met, and just all of the other alumni. They connected me so quickly and in such a way that we were able to make connections and pull on resources and identify different opportunities for our students in a way that I couldn't have imagined any other way. And so there was absolutely a ton of hustle on my end, but the network is really sort of the opportunity meeting with the moment. So I'm grateful for that. And we also just really encourage our students to nurture their own relationships, because it's not just their own hard work that's going to result in great outcomes for them, but it's also the people who are looking out for them, who are aware of them, who are supporting them, and who hopefully they are recognizing and feeding into because of that support along the way.
Yeah, and I tell students as well, at some point, I don't want you to need me. My job initially was to help introduce you to those opportunities and open up those doors for you, but you guys now become your own social capital. You become your own network, right? Because when I think about the 100+ alumni that I know, they're across the industry, across the country, at all the major firms, and at some point they'll be like, hey, call your friend at Goldman Sachs, right? Because you guys know each other, you came up together, and now you become your own network, and you guys will rise and pull each other up at the same time. So I think the fact that you also speaking to your students about that, because you're working with thousands of kids, and for them to be out there like working and doing their thing now, and now they can call each other, right? And I think that's your legacy. That's the Code to College legacy as well. Is they become their own network after a while, and which is a super powerful thing. So, one idea, one thought on that is, like, what's your view on, how do we change the industry, right? So I think for me, focus on finance and fintech in particular. You was in finance as well. I worked primarily on trading floors in New York and Chicago. And I started my organization based on my own story of looking around the trading room, like, where is everybody else who looked like me? And I'm sure you saw some of that as well too. What's your perspective on how do we at scale, we need like as many Code to Colleges as possible. On the flip side, these organizations probably should never even exist, right? We should be out of business, right? But what's your view on how do we make meaningful change in the industry as a whole?
Yeah, that's my goal, is to put us out of business. I've said a number of times in the last maybe year or two, if Code to College is still around in 2030, then we did something wrong. We should be creating a model that can be replicated and scaled, not even just nationally, but globally, such that students who are otherwise underestimated have access to these incredible opportunities. And there should never be a company saying we can't find enough talent, not even just diverse talent, just technical talent. For years, we've continued to hear this mantra of there's just not enough technical talent. There's this technical talent gap. It's just like, well, why? Of course, there's a technical talent gap if you're looking at the same two universities and expecting that that's how you're going to fill the pipeline, or that's how you're going to staff your workforce. It's like there's talent all over the place, and some of them go to other colleges. Some of them don't go to colleges. Some of them don't look like the same archetype, and you have to break those biases. And what I think about, and I love that you have this podcast and you're talking about social capital, is because social capital is a big part of that. I remember listening to this podcast recently, and they were talking about the impact of your network, and I think it was Hidden Brain, and they were just talking about it from just different angles. But one of the angles they talked about was the benefit of low income communities being mixed, i.e., having mixed income communities, because for a poor or otherwise economically disadvantaged student to have access to and connection with someone who is from a middle income or upper income household status, that is so much more impactful to their overall trajectory than a handout or charity would be. In one instance, with that charity, you're addressing a short-term need, a basic need. With the other, you're actually empowering that student to build for themselves. And it's not to say that people don't need their basic needs met. Of course they do. But we're talking about, when you talk about generational wealth building, when you're talking about economic mobility, when you're talking about building sort of a legacy and irreparably breaking down this system of inequity, we need, for lack of a better phrasing, integration.
Yeah.
We need integration and connection and relational building. And so that is also what we're trying to do with our students in Code to College is if you don't have a software engineer, an architect, an anesthesiologist, a biomedical engineer in your family friend group who attends your church and who you speak to in your congregation, or who otherwise you have in your circle, how would you ever know to pursue any of those careers if you've never met someone who's fulfilled that role, let alone have never heard of it? Yeah. And so we want to break that down. We've got volunteers from all spans of industries, from semiconductors to fintech to VC to PE to investment banking to asset management to architects. And in doing so, students are able to get exposure to, wow, like I had no idea that semiconductors were in everything from my phone to my laptop, and they start asking questions like, what courses should I be taking? Like, should I be in calculus if this is, because I was not going to take calculus, but now I'm thinking maybe I should be if I want to learn more about semiconductors. What colleges should I apply to? What major should I think about? Or they're saying, I never want to hear about semiconductors again. But either way, like that exposure is so impactful because they are able to make much more informed decisions about their futures. It reminds me of when I was a teacher and I taught at a Title I charter high school in New Haven, Connecticut. And one of the first things I would do at the start of the year is ask students what they aspire to be, what role they aspire to enter after they either graduated from high school or if they went on to college after they graduated from college. And, the three most popular answers were rapper, some form of athlete, or a teacher. And what do those three things have in common? Those are three professions that they see in front of their face and are exposed to. Like the first two are entertainers who they see quite often, right? And the third is oftentimes the only other person that they see who is called a professional, who has a profession, or who dresses up, like the teachers who they see every single day. But that doesn't mean we didn't have like the future, we didn't have a future aspiring rocket scientist in that class or the next greatest investor in that class. They just never heard of these industries or these careers. So how would they know to pursue those or to emulate those people? And so, one of the other things that I tried to do was share with them Black and brown professionals who had just a battery of careers that they probably never heard about, Mm-hmm. I introduced them to Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, right? And we talked about the Supreme Court and the structure of the courts and how would you aspire to be there? It was great because she was a Yale Law School grad, and it brings it back full circle because we were in New Haven. We talked about Robert F. Smith, this Black billionaire whom they had never heard of, who did things like buys businesses. Whoever thought that there was an industry where you buy businesses? Like your business is to buy other businesses and make sure that they make more money. And so things like this, it just opens up the aperture for students. You say it all the time. You can't be what you can't see. And so we want to make sure that they see a lot.
Yeah, you're so right, man. You and I always on the same page because, we, through our career in finance and other places, we saw it, we experienced it ourselves. It's a lived experience. Right? I started this organization because of a lived experience, and it becomes really personal to you. And you touched on a lot of things there. And I think one thing that sticks out to me all the time is the same way people talk about generational wealth. The same way you hand down generational wealth from generation to generation, you hand down poverty as well and lack of access. That's a thing as well. So I think you're so right when students get exposed to so many different individuals doing different things, you know, getting them out of the community. A big thing for me was to take my college kids every summer to New York, spend a week on Wall Street, to go on step on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and see that this is a real thing, but also see that my friends, three of them were the only black people on the floor. And there was one woman there, right? At the time, and we just saw something, we commented something on LinkedIn, Lauren Simmons, she was there at that time. And Matt, let me tell you something, man. The young woman that was with me, like six of them, they just could not believe what they were seeing. And I told her, I was like, listen, and she knows this as well. I mean, representation matters, man. And the fact that you guys go out and find professionals who look like our kids, because the biggest question I have from young people is, okay, I'm going to do this internship, I'm going to do this job, but will there be anybody there who looks like me? And companies, many of them, don't even think about that, right? Because they're like, hey, you should just be happy to have a job, just come to work. I'm like, listen, man, like the challenges and the barriers to entry of just showing up for a lot of our kids in their communities is stuff like you guys don't deal with. So, I think helping companies as well, that's something I've had to do, and I'm interested in your thoughts too. But, we're working with young people and we know how to deal with them, and we're helping them. How are you helping your corporate partners understand your mission, what you're trying to do exactly?
Yeah, we try to be, and I heard this recently. For years I've been saying data driven, data driven, and I heard recently somebody say, I don't strive to be data driven. I strive to be data informed. And I said, wow, yes,
Wow.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, data informed, because first off, data is objective.
Mm-hmm.
It's objective. How you use it is subjective. And I think at the risk of having subjective findings or decisions, I think being data informed is critical. I think you can be driven by strategic decision making and by a mission, and that's what we strive to be. I will say data plays a huge part in the messaging with our partners. There's a lot of data that I share when I speak to partners, when I speak to prospective volunteers, and you'll hear me share numbers and stories alike. But I also try to identify the value proposition. They're not just it's interesting. I'll oftentimes hear from prospective partners, Matt, you should talk more about this being the right thing to do. Don't talk about how effective the interns are. And I say, well, tell me that after we're partners. and I have to talk about the value proposition. The value proposition is we've got a great track record of high school interns who are actually contributing to their teams. We have a highly diverse population of students who are Black, brown, and girls. We have a high degree of retention. The interns who get offers to come back go back year after year. As a matter of fact, this is now our first year where we get to celebrate our first crop of interns who've made it all the way from high school interns with a company through undergrad, and now they've accepted full-time offers. Wow. And so and then add to that, if we get to the volunteerism coupled with the internships, one of the pieces of data that we hear back is that this is great for employee engagement and employee retention for companies who partner with us, because they say, you, i.e. the company, you walk the talk. You don't just say that you're all for diversity. You say that you're for diversity, and then you partner with organizations like Code to College. you say you're for diversity, and then you hire these Black and brown students to intern and help us develop products. You don't just say that you're for diversity, but you are supporting and working directly with this Black founder CEO. So those are things that I talk about, as well as the value proposition, because it's important. I mean, we impact their bottom line? If we do, it is a scintilla of a scintilla that we make an impact on their bottom line for a couple of interns. But we do make a market impact on the employees who are there, who are full time, and do make an impact, a much more of an impact on the bottom line. And I mean, look, we're speaking with companies who have to generate a return for their investors.
Right.
So I have to speak to them. I have to speak to them in their language, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I saw the same thing. I mean, in the finance industry in particular, right? It's all about ROI and it's all about that stuff. But on the volunteer side, we attracted a ton of volunteers, because I'm sure the same thing for you guys. You as a volunteer are now volunteering from a position of strength, because you are meeting young people who want to have your job one day, right? And if I meet a young person that says, you know what, I want to do what you're doing, I'm very motivated and invested to help that young person, because you're speaking my language, right? So yeah. I think that's something that we saw, and you guys are probably seeing that as well. But what I've seen as well, those employees, sometimes they're all in before the firm is all in, right? And they get the firm, they bring the firm with them, because all of a sudden you got 20 employees over here at this company saying, you should do this. We all doing this on the weekends or whenever. I'm mentoring, helping with the curriculum, I'm designing projects, I'm judging pitch competitions or whatever. And the firm is like, wow, we should probably pay attention. So I like the grassroots model, where we get the employees on board and they bring the firm with them. And there's some big firms who could write some big checks as well, and just invest heavily in what you guys are doing. So the fact that you guys are like, have an army, I see your updates about just volunteering opportunities and stuff. You're celebrating all your volunteers. So that's really, I think, a thing that a lot of nonprofits who are trying to scale kind of overlook sometimes, is the value of the employees at that firm that they're trying to partner with.
Oh, absolutely. So traditional nonprofit employee engagement model or volunteer model is, we'll put something together for you, or you ask to do something with us. Okay, fine, we'll do it. It's not actually beneficial to us, but we'll do it. Give us a donation, right? And I feel for nonprofits who do that, because it's transactional. It's a waste of their time. I would venture to say, generally speaking, on like call it a 1 to 3 or 4 hour volunteer engagement, the donation that you get is not worth the time that it took to develop the content and execute on that programming. And so, knowing that, going into developing Code to College's program model, I said, well, we're going to flip that. And instead of leveraging volunteers being a thing that we hate to do, or a thing that is burdensome to us, we're actually going to employ a volunteer-based model by which, like, the more volunteers we get, the better. Yeah. Like, we get to serve more students the more volunteers we have. We get to make more impact the more volunteers we have. And in doing so, we did flip it. And instead, I believe companies are more invested in you. If not I believe, I will tell you wholeheartedly, here's like major keys. Companies are more invested in you if their people are invested in you. I think a lot of times, and this is a mistake. Look, this is a mistake I've made before too. You think getting to know a CEO is the end all be all. You're like, oh, I know the CEO, so like the money's going to start raining down. It's like, I mean, maybe the smaller the organization, that's probably true. But the larger the organization, it is actually to the detriment of a CEO to identify favorites and to use corporate dollars to support their favorite, right? that's an absolute lose-lose situation. However, if you can convert evangelists and champions in the company and have the CEO or senior leaders support
Yeah.
you, that vertical integration, that vertical support, that's where the real gold is, because
Yeah.
then you've got like it's the bottom up and top down. You've got the grassroots approach where they're like, yes, we're involved, we see the impact, we can give you actual stories, and because they're immersed in the day to day.
Yeah.
But then you've also got the senior leadership who've actually got the purse strings, and they're saying, so what's happening down there? And they get all of these anecdotes of like, Code to College is great, Code to College is great, Code to College is great, Code to College. So all I'm hearing is Code to College is great. Is it okay if we give them money?
Exactly.
So that is ideally that is how it happens. I'm not going to say it happens all the time. I'll say the more bureaucracy there is, the harder it is. But that's what you want. You want to embed volunteerism, at least in some portion of the work that you're doing, because people want to see the impact. Like
Yeah.
they want to feel it. Like it needs to be like people are very tactile when it comes to social impact. I don't we all remember Sally Struthers. Like
Mm-hmm.
you saw the video, like it was very intentionally pulling at your heartstrings, and that's why you gave. Well, that's why some people gave. Same thing. It's like if you're not operating at that level that you can get a commercial on late night, you have to be compelling in some other way. And everyone's got stories.
Yeah.
So the next best way, or the better way, is to get people involved in the actual work, speaking with your beneficiaries, helping you. A friend in need is a friend indeed. And once they've been able to help you, they oftentimes want to help you financially as well.
Yeah. What you mentioned before with getting the top on board, the grassroots, like that's the formula, man. Like I tell people that over the last couple of years, we raised a couple $1 million for my organization, and that was the key. That yes, it's great to have an advocate in the CEO and leadership and the C-suite. You get the grassroots people yelling your name nonstop, and in addition to that, you can't just rely on people, being advocates. That's great, but you talked about storytelling, and I believe really strongly that that is such an overlooked, underrated fundraising mechanism, because I never went to anyone and asked for a donation. I went and I told them a story. I told them my story, why I started the organization. I'm telling them like 2 or 3 stories of young people who might be at their firm right now or interned there last year or whatever. And that was it, man. Like that was the formula. So I feel like not enough nonprofit organizations really dig into their stories, because when you hear, like I've been talking to a lot of my past students on this podcast, and Matt, when I tell you when I release these things, like I mean, I was crying when when I was talking to them. So it's really powerful, impactful, and I've known them since high school, and I've seen their trajectory. I've seen the impact. I've seen what's happened. With the access to the opportunity and stuff. And I feel like you really need to lean into stories. So maybe talk a little bit about how you guys do your storytelling and the role that plays in fundraising too.
I will, and I just want to shout you out because I'm trying to follow your lead, man. You are a masterful storyteller. The imagery, the just the evocative language, like you crush it out there. But my and our storytelling at Code to College, we really try to lead with, what is the impact that this experience has had on this student's life. I think there's the tendency to try to dramatize everyone's experience and make you know the 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 heartstrings. The more you pull the heartstrings, the more dollars come, is sort of the formula of some. And I don't want to dramatize anyone's situation. I don't
Right.
want to make them seem downtrodden. I mean, look, some of our students are middle income students or come from middle income households. Some students are black or brown, but like, they've got two parents who've got master's degrees and doing just fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't, to me, that doesn't undermine the impact that this is making. In fact, there is this one brother who we highlighted every day for the last several years during Black History Month, I highlight someone in Black history and on social media. And this brother, he worked at one of our semiconductor partners last summer, and he did a phenomenal job. Both of his parents are doctors, but he's a Black brother. He's intelligent. He's brilliant, but he didn't know how to code.
Right.
He didn't know how to code until he started Code to College. He did really well in our program. Worked with a PhD who was, a distinguished engineer at the company. And now he not only completed that internship, is going for his second internship this summer before he graduates, or right after he graduates from high school, but he started a coding club at his high school. So went from not having coded before to being, and I don't think I can overstate the fact that a young Black man starting a coding club at a school that is, mixed in demographic, that is awesome. That is so awesome.
That is huge.
Like and he's like a year into coding. That's awesome to me. And the impact that had on him, and his parents were shouting him out on social, like, yeah, that's my son. And the like, he's getting to write about that in college admissions essays, that he was a high school junior and had an internship at a global semiconductor company. Like, sometimes I pinch myself because the refrain that I commonly hear from our volunteers is, I wish I had this when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And these are like senior software engineers, or sometimes senior managers or directors of like whole divisions. And they're saying to me, I wish I had this when I was a kid. I'm like, you look like you're doing fine. What's wrong? But what they're saying by that is not, I don't like where I am. What they're saying is the impact that it would have had on my life as a high school student to have this level of exposure and access, and to build a network and experience and economic opportunities. You see where I am. I would have been CEO of, exactly. I would have made my own Facebook, like that is what they're saying. They're saying, like, I could have done even more. And so I love that our organization gets to serve as a force multiplier in these students' lives, and that I made this up on the spot when I had to deliver a speech, but it really stuck with me. We're not building just generational wealth, we're building generational joy. This is not just impacting the students, it's impacting their siblings, it's impacting their parents, their grandparents, and the generations that are coming after them as well.
Yeah, and I think what that person said resonates with me too, because if you and I think about our lives, our professional lives, and how we grew up, we have kids who are around the same age as well. And what I was telling someone just last week in San Francisco, I was talking to some of my alumni. I was talking to a young man. He's the third brother that I've met that came through my program, the third one. And what was happening was, every time one brother joined, we were closing the gap, right? Yep. So think about you and think about me. Our kids today, it's automatic. Like, it could happen. They could learn to code. They could be in finance. They could be like whatever. We could make those things happen. For us, what was that like? We didn't have that. I didn't have that. Right? I just happened to fall into a trading floor in New York 20 years ago and figured it out on my own. But I created this organization to close that gap, because our kids, and I've seen this firsthand 15, 20 years ago, there were kids coming, like, bring your kid to work day. And some of those kids that I saw sitting on their parents' lap in front of a Bloomberg terminal are traders, investment bankers today. Who was taking our kids to work at those places? Nobody. I wasn't being taken to those places. But what you're doing, and that's what the force multiplier is, that's what the ripple effect is. And when that young man goes back to school and starts a coding club, and that happened with me too. Several of them, after the end of the summer, started investment clubs. Hey, Bevon, can you come speak? I was like, listen, I will support you 100%. I'll bring speakers. I don't care what you need. Let me know. We'll do a stock pitch competition, investing, what portfolio competition, whatever you need. But the fact that you went back to your high school and started an investment club, which has now grown exponentially. And you, again, same thing, junior in high school. And before he met me or us and the organization, didn't even know what a stock was. And when I
Yep.
hear these young people and I see the things that they're taking back to their community and their school, I'm like, man, that's going to be impactful for generations to come. And that's the ripple effect of what you're doing as well. It's like you're planting these seeds, and once it starts growing, the potential is overwhelming and really impactful. I don't think they can pay people like you enough money, Matt, because I think you get paid in that joy that you talked about, right? You get paid in seeing these young people take this back to their schools and the communities and their friends and their siblings. I've met so many siblings in our program over the years because they're taking it back. And I think, me, I've been working a lot of first generation college kids and first to have internships and first to be on a plane. Man, I was taking kids to New York, assuming that they knew what to do. I had to buy them luggage. I had to buy them suits. I had to teach them how to go through TSA. And I was on the plane and they were like holding onto my arms because I was like, wait, you never flown before? Like, no. Right. But it opens up a world to them because many of them are living and working in New York now. Right. And making a lot of money and changing everything for their family and for every generation to come after them. So I just want to shout you out, man, because I think the ripple effect of the work you're doing, man, it is amazing. And I've called you for advice as well too in the past because I was figuring it out on my own. I had never run a nonprofit before. I'd never done this before, and I was looking for people who look like me who were doing it. And I found you, through a mutual friend again, the power of social capital and networking, and you were very, very willing to help. And you were like, hey, man, you need to do this, do that. Don't do this, don't do that. This is what I did. You're very open and willing to help. So I just want to shout you out to say thanks for that as well, man.
Absolutely, and the feeling is mutual. I'm grateful that we have you in this world, Bevon, and keep on doing this great work, man. I mean, if at the end if at the end of this decade, 2030, we hit and we're just seeing a ton of GP scholars and C2C scholars helping to change the world, then we know we did it right.
Like you and I could go to Trinidad and Jamaica and chill,
Let's do it. Hopefully we don't have to wait 70 years to make it happen.
Exactly. But I can't not ask you this question, man. Let's talk about PTO. Like we have to talk about that. I have to talk about it because you on LinkedIn were just saying like you gotta take the PTO. I don't like what is he talking about? And then I kind of realized, for 6 or 7 years my head was down. I was so focused on building and building, right, and helping and you know how it is, man. Like you're all in, and if you don't wake up and get it done, sometimes it doesn't get done if you don't have a team. And for a long time, I didn't have a team; it was just me. But talk about why you started saying that, the importance of that. I took your advice definitely, and I did it. I said thanks for that. But what is that about?
So take the PTO almost a year ago. So it was March 2022. My family and I, so my wife and my two kids, we went to Disney World. So we took them there for the first time. And man, you and I, we started our respective organizations at the same time. And being like a solopreneur is tough. You grind it out and you are doing everything from fundraising to program development to program management to relationship building, etc. And even as you grow your team and start to hire employees, you're still doing a lot of work. It's not as though the work starts to sort of split up and your time gets freed. It's like, no, you're growing. And so there's actually more to do. And so, I've over the last 7 years realized that I need to extract myself from work. I think there's just tons of opportunity to say, let me just get to this next milestone and then I'll spend time and but there'll always be another milestone. And so life is, it's just like that scene from The Wire when Lester said, life is what happens when you're waiting for moments that never come.
Right.
Right. And so I've just been working diligently, and not to say I haven't backslid several times, on being present when I'm with my kids and with my wife, making sure that I'm making memories with them and I'm not looking down at my phone, that I'm not thinking about work, that I'm not every moment I get like, oh, that's a business opportunity there. And Disney World, in preparation, I told my team, look, if you need something, call me. Also, don't need something, you know? And so while I was there, I took the mail app, I hit it on my phone, and I was just like, I'm just not going to check it, And we had the time of our lives at Disney World. The kids loved it. They had, and that's why you go to Disney World. And we were on some ride. I think maybe it was Thunder Mountain. And people on the post at Thunder Mountain, but I took a picture as we were, ascending up the hill, and I hadn't planned for it. I just planned for it to be just like a shot catching us, having fun. It was a good shot. I'm not that great a photographer, but damn, it was a good shot. And I posted it, I think, when I got back, because when I was scrolling through my photos, I was like, damn, like this was so much fun. Like even looking back at the photo, it just brought back all of those feelings of joy. And I posted, and I just on LinkedIn, I said, take the PTO. That's it. That's the post. Yeah. That was it. And I swear it went from like 100 likes in like 15 minutes to like 1,000 likes in an hour to a week later. I had gotten probably like 30 people texting me or like Facebook messaging me or emailing me like, take the PTO, man, or like, Matt, you've gone viral. And I think it went up to, I will say within the first week, it went to like 8 million views. Whoa. And several 100,000 shares. And I was just like, or reactions. I was just like, okay, I guess this like struck a nerve with some people, but like people were just like, yeah, take the PTO. And people, even still now, I'll see them. Someone even did it like last week. They posted, inspired by Matt Stephenson, take the PTO. I was so glad when I saw this post, and it just reminded me, you know what, I need to take a step back, take some time for myself. Yeah. Seeing people, they're doing take the PTO and they're doing shots with their families, just like at the beach or like, and I was just like, I hadn't intended to go viral. I don't think you can intentionally go viral, but if I go viral for anything, like I'm glad it's that.
No, so, man, I think I noticed, like I said, I saw it. I'm like, I should do that, and the fact that it was the fact that it was coming from you. So it was, we see things online all the time, but when you posted that and I saw the picture and stuff, I'm like, yeah, man, like, because our organizations were like the same age or whatever, and kids same, so I'm like, yeah, man, I need to do that because, we're not good to ourselves or anybody else if we're like burnt all the way out. Right, we can't help anybody if we're just not mentally there, right? And the mental health stuff as well too. I think when you posted that, I'm like, you kind of like something just clicked. I'm like, yeah, I need to do that, man, because this we're growing and we're growing really quickly, and I was just like going 24/7, man. You know how it is, yeah, the grind and doing everything, and disconnected just like you did, and probably ended up in Florida or somewhere, but. Same thing, man. Time of my life, kids had a ball, came back ready to go and ready for the next PTO as well too. So yep. now you've kind of like created this habit in people's head, like we got to do this because we remember how we feel when we come back from it. So I just want to say thanks for that random post that turned into this habit for all of us now. So you really impacted a lot of folks, man, across the board, not just nonprofit folks, but I think anybody who sees that, because working in finance, our PTO would always like roll over to the next year. We wouldn't take it. It is. Like, yep. You just kept rolling it over, and it's there for a reason. So I just want to say thanks for doing that. As we look to kind of wrap up, I want to touch on a question around like nonprofit leaders, especially nonprofit leaders of color. What advice do you have for fellow nonprofit folks who are running organizations, thinking about starting them in different stages? You've learned a lot, man. You've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you. Like, what's like top piece of advice you would have for anybody trying to start an organization and grow and do as much as you've done? in a short space of time, you have done a ton as well. So any piece of advice you have for founders of color in particular trying to do what you do as well?
Well, first off, I would say if you're looking to start a nonprofit, reconsider it. I think, in all seriousness, a lot of people think, I want to make a change in the world, so let me start a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, being an entrepreneur, period, is hard. It is not sexy. I know that there are a lot of founders out there who've done really well. Those are the ones that you hear about. You don't hear about the ones who crash and burn. You don't hear about the ones who go broke. You don't hear about the ones who go into debt. You don't really hear about the ones who, they start it, they leave their job, and then they have to stop doing it and go back to the job. Like,
Yeah.
you generally only hear about the successes. And so if you truly want to start a nonprofit, I would say do your homework, meet people, just exactly what you said, Bevon, of like, you did the rounds, like do a little road show and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this idea. Who should I talk to? That is what you say. Also, don't be afraid to share your idea. Like, I know that people are a little bit nervous, or it's just like, oh, this is stealth mode, I don't want to. It's like, look, man, ideas are like plants. They grow in the light.
Yeah.
So, and it's not about the idea, it's about the execution. So I promise you, anything that you want to start, somebody has started and stalled and started again a million times over. So and as a matter of fact, if like you want to hear if somebody's done this before, because you want to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this is going off topic a little bit, but there was a guy who in business school was looking to start a company, and when he told me about it, I was like, oh, you know what? I got a buddy of mine who I roomed with, who's also at our business school. He tried to do the same thing. Let me connect you. And he ended up having a very successful company and an exit. So you want to talk to other people, see how they did it, learn the mistakes from them instead of learning for yourself. I would say if you're a nonprofit leader of color, think you have to be resilient. You have to let no be your rocket fuel. And, I think that a lot of times it's easy to get discouraged and say, like, you did that because I'm Black, or you did that because I'm a woman. You're just like, yeah, maybe. Now, what are you going to do with that? like, are you going to take their no for an answer? Or are you going to I think I generally am very stubborn. Like, again, Jamaican heritage, I'm very stubborn. And so, I don't really care that you said no. I know what we need to achieve. And so I'm going to break down barriers to get it. And then I would also say, don't be afraid to say yes to things because you're Black or a woman or Hispanic. Like, I think sometimes people are offended and because you feel like a token. It's like, yeah, your tokenism may get you in the door. It's not going to keep you in the room.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I was invited because it was like, oh, we need a Black guy. It's like, all right, cool. We need the resources. We need the connections. And if the person who invited me thinks a certain way and is a little bit, let's say ignorant, that doesn't mean everyone else in the room is ignorant. And that doesn't mean that this person can't learn. We're all ignorant. And having that orientation has opened up a lot of doors for us that if I had been prideful, would have stunted our growth or arrested our development.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act. I've been in many rooms, man, and youngest person, only person of color in that room, different ideas as well too, that kind of was going against the grain because in finance and in other industries they've been doing things a certain way for a long time and getting results, so to speak. But here I was showing up saying all these different things. But and I try to teach young people this, how to read a room, how to show up there as your authentic self and still be able to get some results out of that conversation. And when you get invited to those rooms, a lot of people complain about not having a seat at the table. But when you get one, you better be ready. You better be ready to pitch. You better be ready to say, yes, these are the next steps. This is we're going to do it. And you're probably the same way. I obsess over execution. Getting people to say yes has become easy for me, but I worry about, can we do what we say we're going to do? Right? That's what really matters to me is like, yes, we can get these companies on board, but at the end of the summer, at the end of the year, what we said we were going to do, we need to do. And that kind of drives me as well. But I think that's great advice, for I also will probably echo that don't start a nonprofit. But I did it because of my own story and to help kids. I didn't know it was going to blow up and turn into this massive thing. But, you know, I tell young people, like, go out and have a career. Like, you know, the more money you make, the more good you could do in the world.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that's how it works, right? And companies as well, you know, they can do good and do well at the same time. And we could partner with them to do that. And I could be in the for-profit space. I mean, you're speaking the money language with them, right? That's what they understand, return on investment and that kind of stuff. So, just one last question I want to touch on as well. So, what are your thoughts on the future workforce? One that kind of stresses skills, especially in tech. College still has a role to play, I believe, but more and more employers in the tech space, you're probably more versed in this than I am, saying, hey, if you're coming to add value right away, if you can code, if you can do this, you know, come on in, we'll help train you up and get you ready. So as more and more employers are putting like a emphasis on skill set, especially coding and stuff, how do you see that reflected in the future, especially for the kids you're working with now?
Oh man, the future is fractional. The future of work is fractional. You know, I I think that there is entirely too much lip service given to what degree. I mean, there's sort of like these generational phases. Like it used to be where you went to school, and then it was like what you majored in, and then it was, you know, what credentials you get, or maybe we're still in that phase right now. But it's like when you get down to it, the people who are saying that generally are not empowered by the business. They're not speaking from the business. The business cares about what you can do, not what you've learned or what degree you have. And so I believe that the future of work is fractional. And what I mean by that is, you know, we're in this state of flux right now in the macroeconomic environment where folks are getting laid off and folks are, you know, I'm not even going to say the QQ phrase, but being able to develop your talent by having multiple jobs, like whether part-time jobs or having full-time job and some part-time or some side gigs, like whatever it takes to upskill you and that you are developing independently, that is going to make you a much more attractive candidate. And much more attractive candidate. I think most people, if I ended it there, like ... would say, oh, much more attractive candidate for the next full-time role. I say much more attractive candidate, period. Because being able to have fractional work, it obviates itself when you're working from home to have multiple roles. It also creates a lot more stability for you from like a revenue or an income stream perspective. And it also allows you to be more creative and more flexible and have more fun in your life, right? Because I'm somebody who gigged, you know, again, Jamaican heritage. Like there are many times in my life where I've had 5 and 6 jobs, right? You know? And so, but I will tell you, those were some of the most fun times of my life. Like I was gigging, I was a tutor. It's like that old skit from In Living Color. It's like I was a tutor, I was a teacher. Yeah. I was a judge, jury, and prosecution. Like but what was great about it was that I had control over my schedule, right? I had, you know, 4 to 6 on Mondays and Wednesdays. I had this one client. 9 o'clock in the morning on Fridays, I would teach this virtual class of students in Detroit. And I was making solid money, probably about as much as I would make if I were working a full-time gig. But I mean, I based it around my calendar. It was great. I could tell a client, hey, look, I'm not available next Wednesday. What day works out better? Or we skip that Wednesday. You don't have that flex. Like there was no PTO. There's just, I don't want to work that day.
Manage your own time.
So yeah. And I think as people get more comfortable with that and companies elect to hire more fractional talent, I think you're going to see a lot more upskilling, a lot more high quality work delivered in a cost effective manner. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, likewise, man. I believe I'm on the same page with you on seeing that shift happening, you know, employers in finance, fintech, wealth tech, everything tech now. So, right. So I'm seeing it in Chicago big time. I'm seeing it across the country. And I believe that Code to College in particular, the things you guys are doing, the groundwork you've laid for the last 6-7 years, it's gonna pay off big time for these young people, man, because some of the jobs that they will be doing post college don't even exist yet. But we know it's gonna have a tech leaning part to it. So, talking about your Code to College kids, what are your hopes and dreams for them, man? For all the students you've met so far, all the students you'll meet again. Again, hopefully you're out of business by 2030. But what are your hopes and dreams for all your kids in Code to College?
Simply that they pay it forward.
I agree. I think we made it mandatory that our college kids mentor our high school kids. And they had to do that for free. It wasn't getting paid for that. And I said, we lift as we climb, man. Like, you go through that door, you keep it open. Like, you have to keep it open. Pay it forward. So I'm 100% on the same page with you there. As we kind of wrap up, I always end with, I'll allow the guests to ask me a question. You can ask me anything. And so this is your opportunity. I know we have a lot of history together. You know, a lot of stuff that's going on with me and stuff like that. But yeah, you ask me anything.
Number one place that you would move to that does not include Trinidad?
Tobago.
Oh, whoops. My fault. No, Fair enough.
Let me tell you why, though. Not Trinidad, because that's where all my family is.
Okay.
You know how it is when you go home, man. Like, everybody wants a piece of you. You got to go visit your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, everybody. Tobago, I don't have any family. It's a small place. I love Tobago, man. I highly recommend it. Definitely, that would be my go-to spot for sure.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
No, Matt, thank you, man. So, Code to College on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. That's the handle. Codetocollege.org is the website. Matt, I'm sure a lot of people will be reaching out to you, students in particular, after this. We'll share your LinkedIn information and stuff. But I just want to say, man, you have been somebody that's inspired me on my journey. You were always, like I said earlier, willing to help. And, you don't find that often, that genuine people just want to help you, see you succeed and do well. And, we've been in the trenches. I'm in Chicago, you're down there in Boston. Same story. I feel like impact you're having for generations to come is just going to be phenomenal. Somebody that I've looked up to and admired. And thanks so much for being my early guest on this podcast. You're one of the first people I thought about, because I just like talking to people who I feel get it, who really understand, not just working with young people, but working with firms, raising money, starting organizations, living life in general. So I just want to say much gratitude to you for just being who you are, man, because it means a lot to me personally.
Same to you, brother. All the best, and we're going to continue to link up and make great impact happen.
Well, definitely. Thanks again for being on, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Capital Guy podcast. We were joined this week by my good friend Matt Stephenson, CEO and co-founder of Code to College, an Austin, Texas-based nonprofit. Matt builds the students' competency, confidence, and social capital by teaching them the fundamentals of professional development skills and how to code, and exposing them to a variety of STEM-related fields. Matt talked about coining the term "take the PTO," which went viral a couple summers ago, and I know his advice had made me a better leader and entrepreneur. It was great hearing Matt's thoughts and perspectives on the future of work. As the world keeps changing and evolving, and work is becoming more and more fractional, we'll see this reflected in the future, jobs that his young people and all young people will be taking on in the future. Additionally, he had some great tips and perspectives and thoughts and advice for leaders of color, especially when it comes to leveraging their social capital to raise money and to tell their story. As always, I appreciate you listening, and please follow the Social Capital Guy on all social media platforms. You can catch the Social Capital Guy podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Amazon Prime Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, your network is your net worth. TikTok.